What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, and today I'm going to be reviewing and ranking Baroness's albums, the 6 studio albums they have released thus far. Number 6 just coming out like 9 days ago, 10 days ago, prior to my making of this video. An album I've only had a week and a half to enjoy, but they did release 3 of the singles prior to that, so I was able to listen to those quite a bit before the official release of the album. They are a metal band out of Savannah, Georgia. I'm putting metal in quotes because while they definitely fall under that genre, they have a lot of prog elements, maybe sounding like a little more driven Pink Floyd or a little more heavy Rush at times. Some psych elements, some sludge elements, some just alt metal elements, some pure metal elements, some hard rock elements. Really good. Always have an awesome rhythm section. Drums very present. Bass very driving and moving the songs forward. There's usually a lead guitarist and then a rhythm guitarist, and they usually double up like the melodic lines and stuff like that. So you get these really just almost Allman Brothers-esque like lead melodic lines that drive a lot of these songs, or like in the middle sections, instead of like solos, you get these really complicated prog sections, something like maybe a Rush or even Zappa would do like in the mid 70s, those kind of like types of ideas. But they definitely don't sound like those bands, but that's maybe the flavor of, that's I think what it's best, easiest to compare it to. But anyways, fantastic band. They have not put out a bad album. Incredible live. One of those bands live that when they're done with the song, somebody will keep playing, and then other people will join in, and then someone will keep playing, and they'll find their way into the next song in like as smooth a way as possible. Just really great live band, great energy. But anyways, I'm just going to go through the 6 albums from my least favorite to my favorite. I'll put the list up on the screen when I'm done, and then you let me know what you think, and ideally you go check this band out, because they are fantastic, especially if you're into metal. They're probably a very good entryway into metal because they're not that extreme. They're not that hard. Probably the heaviest thing about them is their lead vocalist has a, not necessarily a growl, but very much a in-your-face, very blunt yell. The guy who's kind of the heart and soul, their rhythm guitar player, their lead singer John Dyer Baisley. I think he writes the majority of the songs. He is the guy who designs all their fantastic album covers. The Zappa connection, they both cover, well, no, this band, they both covered Jimi Hendrix. This band, back in the day, covered Machine Gun quite a bit, the Band of Gypsy song. That might be one of the best songs Jimi Hendrix ever did, but that's the connection. Zappa covered Hendrix at least once, Purple Haze, also on the cover of We're Only in It for the Money, Hendrix is, and Zappa. And then Baroness covered Hendrix also. So anyways, 6-1, let's get on to number 6. Number 6 is their most recent album, Stone, and I don't think it's recency bias because there are actually 2 things, one, an actual song, 2, a thing they're now doing that I don't like, or maybe I don't like as much as I love literally everything else that they do. For the most part, a pretty solid Baroness album. It kind of reminds me of their album Purple, which is the one album other than this which felt very, I don't want to say disconnected, but felt very more like a collection of great songs as opposed to a collection of great songs that feel cohesive. Purple felt a little more just like, oh, we have this great song and this great song and this great song, let's put them all in an album. That's kind of the feeling I get with this album, which it works. I'm not complaining about it. It's still a fantastic album. But there are 2 things I don't like. One is 2 of the songs, Beneath the Rose and Choir, which musically are fantastic. Like the Beneath the Rose, which is a longer, like 5.5 minute one, kind of slowly builds and gets heavier and then segues directly into this the awesome groove of Choir. But both of them have these sort of spoken word interludes, which are like narration in a track, like just somebody kind of moving a story along. And I just don't think it works. I really like Baisley's, that is how you pronounce his name? I really like Baisley's growl, yell, scream, whatever he does. Him reeling it in, or whoever's doing the reeling it in, I'm assuming he's the one doing these vocals. It just doesn't work for me. I just don't really like the spoken word aspect. Feels like a different band. It just, I don't know. There's something about it I don't like. And I think it does prevent Beneath the Rose and Choir from being the absolute fantastic 1-2 punch that they would be like in the middle of this album. Starts off with Embers, which is like a little 1-minute instrumental piece. They have a lot of little instrumental interludes on all their albums. Sometimes they're buried at the back of a track and not indexed. Sometimes they're indexed separately. Sometimes it feels like these instrumental tracks are part of other songs, and it could have been like a 20-minute song, but instead they've sort of indexed them as separate songs. I think someone like Yes would have had it be one like 15-minute song. Baroness is maybe breaking them up into smaller parts. But those little instrumental things, they're all beautiful, or they're all delicate, or they all have the perfect groove, or they do such a good job of like providing these sort of this ebb and flow between the longer, more epic songs. And Embers opens off with like little delicate embers burning before we just drop into the heavy groove of Last Word. Beneath the Rose and Choir, great songs that are just kind of undermined by the spoken word. The Dirge, Shine, and Magnolia all like lean into their more acoustic tendencies. Shine and Magnolia will then drop into like heavier grooves, which is always a good thing. Under the Wheels, probably the weirdest song on here. It's not way out there weird, but it's got a little more of a low key kind of smoldering type vibe. Almost sounds like there's maybe some little like Radiohead style electronics providing percussion underneath, but it's just got this really kind of low key bumping bubbly vibe that is, I think, the highlight of the album. It's the second to last song. And then the only other song that really doesn't connect with me, and every other slow song they do, literally every other slow song that they've done, I connect with. There's a haunting vibe to a lot of their slow things, but the closing song Bloom on here, I just haven't really found my connection with that song yet. So I like the album. Gonna see him live in 2 weeks. Super excited for the show. I really enjoy this. It's those two things, the spoken word and the acoustic song at the end. Otherwise, it's a really good album. Great grooves, great playing, absolute just some absolutely phenomenal Baroness energy from start to finish. But it is my number 6. Their most recent one, September 15th, 2023, Stone. So it came out 2.5 weeks ago. Thought it was a week ago. 2.5 weeks ago. Number 5 is their 5th album, Gold and Gray, which it's at 60 minutes. Most of theirs are around 45 to 50, other than Yellow and Green. So maybe it's a double album. Just because usually it's 2 colors. I'm thinking it's a double album because Yellow and Green definitely felt like a double album. Actually was. This is all one CD. But it actually feels like a 3-act play. I think the first maybe 4, maybe 5 songs, but then number 5 goes into number 6. So maybe the first 6 songs feel like the first act of the play. You just this great hard rock and energy to open up with Front Toward Enemy. I'm Already Gone. It's this cool little bass line that kind of reminds me of either like a Radiohead In Rainbows track or maybe like a U2 deep cut 90s track. Maybe something off like Zooropa. Zooropa, was that what it's called? Zooropa? That seems weird. But one of those kind of early U2 90s albums, just that really cool bass that kind of undermines the whole thing. Seasons, a little more pop energy, but still a hard rocker. Then we get an instrumental, one of the cool instrumentals that kind of link things together. Into Tourniquet, which has some really good energy that goes from like kind of a lighter, balladier, more, that kind of energy into some harder energy. And then that kind of goes into Anchor's Lament. And now those first 6 songs kind of feel like they're the first act, because then the next 5, Throw Me an Anchor, I'd Do Anything, beautiful ballad, Blankets of Ash, instrumental, Emmett, Radiating Light, and Cold-Blooded Angels, which kind of picks up the energy, all feel like kind of wasty and hazy and just kind of distant and maybe a little more sadder or just a little more like sparser as far as the instrumentation. Definitely not as many heavy grooves, but it feels like we start off with lots of action, then we get like this introspective middle of the album, and then after Cold-Blooded Angels we get this nice little instrumental that kind of leads us back into the last half of the album, or the last third of the album with Broken Halo, the really cool kind of funky driven Canascura, Borderlines, an almost sort of like mini epic song, Assault on East Falls, another great instrumental, and then the closing Pale Sun, which has this awesome psych energy that almost has a groove that reminds me of like something off like late 80s Stone Roses type psych energy, but with, obviously more of a prog metal bent. Just a really, really neat, definitely psych prog metal song, Pale Sun, to close out the album. Great album, I'm always thinking that albums that run 60 minutes are probably running a little bit too long. And had they dropped maybe a couple songs, maybe one towards the back and one in the middle, it's a tighter, maybe a little more efficient album. That's not the word I'm looking for. Successful. But it's at number 5 only because the other 4 are still pretty absolutely fantastic, if not almost 4 perfect albums. And I do think maybe that wasty part in the middle, which is, it maybe could have been tightened up a little bit, and maybe the end tightened up a little bit. But for the most part, just an excellent album, great flow. Those little instrumental passages, of which on this one, there are 6 of them, work so incredibly well and do so much to just help create just an overall vibe. Really, really, really good listen. Some good playing by everybody. Yeah, that would be my number 5, their number 5, 2019's Gold and Gray. Number 4 is their fourth, Purple, came out in 2015. While they were on tour for the Yellow and Green album in Europe, they had a bus crash. Some serious injuries on that bus crash. 2 band members ended up leaving the band after that, just because. And they sort of restarted. One of the first shows they did, I saw them here in Texas at the Mohawk. And just when Baisley came out on stage, they played their first song, and he was just like, the reception Austin gave him and South Texas gave him, like he was in tears. It was just this beautiful moment. He broke into this long speech about how hard it was for all of them, but to be back on the road playing music. And it was just absolutely magical, magical moment. But this was the album that came out of that. And sort of the heart and soul of this album is a song called Chlorine and Wine, which is number 6, sits right there in the middle, 10 songs. And it's about pain, it's about suffering, it's about trying to come to me and ease my pain. And if you're going to give me stuff to help numb me, I'm going to take it. I'm uncomfortably dumb, I think is the line he references, uncomfortably numb. But it's just maybe about literally being in the hospital bed, being medicated for physical pain, medicated for emotional pain. And it's just bears it all out there. And it's this interesting kind of slow building Baroness, I don't want to use the word ballad, but kind of mid-tempo song that never quite erupts into sort of release that you want it to, but then it shouldn't, because you don't get that release in real life when you go through something like this. You just kind of have to work your way through it and get back on the road and get back on your feet and go on through life. And the Chlorine and Wine, which sits right in the middle of this, it just ties everything together, and it just makes this album so much more powerful. Other than that, I think the album very much feels like a bunch of really, really great songs that just happen to be sequenced perfectly. It's interesting. There probably is lyrically, and if you read it, look at just the album titles, you can feel sort of the pain that runs through a lot of these. But musically, it really does feel like they do a little bit of everything they do really well. We get one hard rocker, we get one kind of slow thing, one kind of poppy thing, one kind of beautiful ballad. We get one instrumental, and that instrumental fugue sits right in the middle of the album instead of opening or closing. So maybe that gives it a different vibe. We get some hard hitting, just high energy songs. Two just great sort of ballady, slow building numbers, Try to Disappear, and If I Have to Wake Up, Would You Stop the Rain? Awesome, phenomenal closer. A little instrumental after that, but essentially the closer of the album. High energy attack in the beginning in Morning Star, kind of bring it back down and build it back up for Shock Me. Try to Disappear just has so many different emotions in it. A great, and it's 42 minutes. It's 42 minutes of just, this is what we do really well in a hard rock. This is us doing a little bit of metal. This is us slowing it down. This is us instrumental. And this is us just doing that Baroness thing where we just deliver these weird emotional wallops right in the middle of Chlorine and Wine. a really, really good album, like an absolutely fantastic album. It's number 4 because there were still 3 absolutely fantastic albums. And I think it might be a really good starting place too, just because it's 42 minutes long. It's got a little flavor of everything. And if you like this, you're going to like everything else they do. But yeah, my number 4, their number 4, Purple. My number 3 is their number 3, and that is a double album for sure, 2012's Yellow and Green, 2 separate discs, the yellow album, the green album. Both of them open up with a theme, the yellow theme and the green theme. The yellow album is a little more, I think, a perfectly sequenced, cohesive, probably the most melodic thing they've done, probably the most easiest to access thing they've done, but with some of their just, I always think like some of their jams when they get out there and they like, especially on these first 3 albums, the one I'm going to talk about next, is they really take their time developing songs and building their songs, and they're a really patient band. And in those instrumental parts that build up, they remind me of something that like, if Lord of the, their songs are not about like elves and orcs. They're not that sort of sci-fi fantasy lyrics. But if Middle Earth had a metal band, like a legitimate metal band that wasn't singing about being in Middle Earth, but was singing about real life human problems or whatever, I think Baroness would be it. Their music just reminds me of like these vast expanses of like Middle Earth, like particularly parts in Lord of the Rings when they're like traveling through the mountains, or they're trying to get to Mordor and the fellowship is together. Some of those sort of vast landscapes remind me of the music that Baroness creates, like their instrumental sort of prog metal stuff. It just has this epic feel to it. And Yellow, I think, is the most melodic version of that epic feel, the first of these 2 albums. Just a perfect album from start to finish. Yellow theme, 1:44 instrumental. The awesome crunching, appropriately crunching, take my bones away, take my bones away. The nice little drum-heavy propulsive march to the sea. The beautiful, weird, psych, prog floating little things. Nice little bring it back down sort of ballad. Then we go into what I think might be one of their best songs, one of those slowly developing, keyboards even drop in. We get some real cool, just like doo-doo-doo-doo-doo type floating energy in Cocainium. Awesome Back Where I Belong, Sea Lungs, a short little rocker, and then the beautiful Eula to close things out. Just absolutely perfect. Probably 40 minutes of music, 38 minutes of music. Just fantastic. Green album gets a little wasty in the middle. We have a long stretch where the energy kind of doesn't get above mid-tempo, but the songs are all pretty strong, and they do at least vary the low, slow tempo sparseness from track to track. But you get Green theme, which is the longer, heavier, crunchier version of sort of a variation of the Yellow theme kind of, but just a lot more in it. Board Up the House, some of the greatest just awesome bass, drums, a little guitar riff that reminds me of something off Kailasa's Spiral Shadow. Just this awesome, dude, that's the line from Cocainium. What is the line for this? Wow, wow. I can't even think of it now. Board Up the House, awesome heavy metal rocker. Mountains, The Crown and Anchor, kind of that floating in between, kind of very Middle Earth, kind of floating type vibe. Then we get a whole stretch of sort of slower, more sparser songs, Fool Song, Collapse, Psalms Alive, Stretch Marker, and then we drop back in with another awesome, just kind of heavy rocker, giving a little bit of everything Baroness does in Line Maker, and then we close out with a little bit of a more softer, If I Forget Thee, Low Country. Green is definitely not as successful as Yellow, but I think if you listen to them back to back and you pair them up, I think they complement each other well. We made the foolish mistake of driving home from Oklahoma City to San Antonio on a Sunday, Thanksgiving weekend. Longest drive of my life, considering how long it should have been compared to what it was. And I think we listened to these 2 albums like 3 or 4 times through. We shouldn't, it was a long drive anyways. But yeah, we just kept listening to them on repeat, and it kind of made me, I'm sitting there in traffic on I-35 when I should be going like 80 miles per hour, and just like, yeah, this is a great album. So I got a chance to really absorb these albums. If they were separate and there were 7 albums instead of 6, Yellow might be number 2. I don't think so. It would definitely still be at number 3. Green would probably fall back to maybe 5. They could maybe fall back behind Purple at this point. But Yellow is so strong that it's able to lift Green and keep it in the number 3 spot. But that's my number 3, their third. And if you're paying attention, the order of the albums has been their 6th, their 5th, their 4th, their 3rd. So the question is, do I think, as according to my favorites, that I like them less with every release, which technically is what would happen according to the ranking of my favorites? We're going to find that out right now, because my number 2 is their number 2, the Blue album, the Blue record. This came out in 2009. It's a perfect album, like it really is. I have 0 complaints about this album. I just like number 1 better. It just flows so perfectly. 44 minutes of just perfect album construction. Opens up with an instrumental Bull's Head Psalm that drops into the absolutely... There are riffs galore. Like every song is a riff into some version of that riff, into a new riff, into some other version of that riff. It is so many riffs on this thing. It is like riff crazy. So we get Bull's Head Psalm, drops into the Sweetest Curse, absolutely great transition. That goes into Jake Leg, more riffs upon riffs upon riffs upon riffs. Then we get the beautiful ballad Steel That Sleeps the Eye, which drops right into Swollen and Halo, which is like the first sort of epic song on here, whose first lyric is Steel That Sleeps the Eye. So the songs are definitely connected. This is one of those songs where I think if Yes had done this, the entire thing would have been called Swollen in Halo, and it would be like 10 minutes long instead of broken up into 2 parts. Then we get a nice little OG Chi hymnal. That drops into the absolutely ridiculous epic A Horse Called Golgotha, which is just a monstrous song. Awesome little short intro that drops into this heavy little groove. That goes into Over Hell and Hide, this instrumental thing with this just galloping, ferocious groove. You get some like spoken word narration, and it sounds like they're riding into a battle zone, because the last like 45 to 30 seconds is just like sonic chaos, but like not like just attack your enemies chaos, but like very well constructed, thought out, instrumental, heavy chaos. That's amazing. That goes into the fantastic War, Wisdom, and Rhyme. Then we get a little like short little thing called Black Powder Orchard, which starts off with this little acoustic thing that kind of, the word black reminds me of Oh Black Waters, the Doobie Brothers. Very little Doobie Brothers vibe, almost backport Southern Doobie Brothers vibe for that. And then that goes into the Gnashing, which is one of those nice that almost spends the entire time, it seems, building up to a climax before we get like a very low version of a song before it finishes out by going into the Bullhead's Lament, harking back to the beginning of the album. Perfectly constructed, perfectly sequenced, highs, lows, instrumentals, bringing it down, getting heavy. It is a perfect album. You cannot go wrong with this album. Blue record. I just like the first one a tiny bit better, even though they're both perfect. And that album is... And my number 1 is their first album, their debut, Red album. Came out in 2007. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Also, the opening track for this, Raise on Pinion, qualifies as possibly the best opening number on a debut album by a band. 7.5 minutes long. You don't get the first vocals until 3 minutes and 45 seconds. And that's not because they're jamming it out. That's not because there's like some long solo. It's because they're slowly like just layering the energy and the grooves and the instruments, and everything's just kind of moving it forward. And it doesn't really feel heavy metal. Definitely has some definite prog vibes. And we're going. It almost seems like maybe this is just an instrumental band, right? But then right at 3 minutes and 45 seconds, we drop into the rah! We scream in the vocals, and we're in heavy metal territory, and then we're off for the next, like, how long is this album? Long album, 56, no, it's not 56 minutes, because there's a really long, silent bonus track that's buried like 12 minutes into it. So it's probably like a 45-minute album. But Raise on Pinion, just a fantastic opening 7 minutes and 35 seconds that takes so long to develop. But the developing, they're just like letting those flavors just like mature and develop. And oh, it is fantastic. That goes right into the birthing, some really short, tight riffing before we're off into like a heavy metal, really like heavy groove. That goes into Isaac, which has one of the best, great dramatic intro. We drop back down with some awesome like crazy sort of picking on the guitar but muting the notes, and then we get this great drum drop, and then we get this great bass drop, and then the vocals are just screamed as loud as they could. Just awesome high energy song. Just the opening, what is that? The opening 15 minutes almost, more 17 minutes, just energy, hard, heavy, progressive metal. Fourth song, Wailing Wintry Wind, we kind of bring it down. We let it slowly develop. We let it kind of go back in before we drop into a heavy groove. We get the nice sort of bring it back down, Cockroach and Fleur. We get Wanderlust, which has this really awesome sort of intertwining guitar line, that melody that they just keep playing with and playing with and playing with, and it seems like they just keep twisting it, and it has this Wanderlust type vibe to it. Absolutely beautiful high energy song. We get Aleph, which sounds sort of like, it's really fantastic groove, goes into like some like heavy Rush sort of like lines at one point, like maybe late 70s Rush. And I don't mean like heavy Rush, like it sounds a lot like Rush, but if Rush was a lot heavier back then, that kind of heavy Rush sort of vibe in the middle of it. The only lyrics are every once in a while, Basie just like "Rah!" just randomly screams. It's absolutely beautiful. Teeth of a Cogwheel, an instrumental that sounds like they mic'd up the teeth of a cogwheel, and maybe somebody was throwing some metal through that cogwheel, because it's all crazy, but has a good rhythm, and it's just kind of makes you feel You get Oh Appalachia, which is almost like 2 minutes and 36 seconds, almost like their prog metal version of a Chuck Berry rocker. Like, let's just throw this out and have a good time with this little ditty. And then you get Grad, which is the closing instrumental of the song. And it reminds me, this is a stretch, but it reminds me sort of Strictly Genteel. It starts off with very sparse, just the guitar, like playing out these long, drawn out like ideas, right? And then slowly other instruments come in, but they're still kind of toying with that same idea and maybe just kind of tweaking it. And then as the song continues to go and things get thrown in, that same idea that we opened with just gets further tweaked and further tweaked and further tweaked, much like the way Frank would like tweak something like Strictly Genteel in like 78 and 88, and throw in like the little mariachi parts and the bolero part and all those other things. Reminds me very much of the way Frank would compose his instrumentals, and take one or two melodic phrases and just kind of toy with them over the course of like 5.5, 6 minutes. That's kind of what I feel like Baroness is doing with Grad. It's like this one idea, and it's starting way simpler, like sparser, just the guitar. But then they just keep adding to it and adding to it. And it just feels symphonic and classical and has just, I don't know, really, really works really well. An amazing ending to an amazing album. But it's a perfect metal album, a perfect prog, metal, whatever you want to call it, heavy album. Highly, highly recommend you check this album out if you have not heard Baroness. It is fantastic. My number one, their number one, their first. Red. And that's all I got. That's what they look like in writing, in order. That's the order they were released. I don't see them changing, to be honest with you. Maybe, I don't think Gray and Gold's better than Purple. Stone, if I get used to that spoken word part, Stone might bump up a little, because I do like the music on those spoken word tracks. I just don't like those spoken word parts. But anyways, an absolutely fantastic discography. You really can't go wrong with any of them. So anyways, let me know what you think of Baroness. Let me know your favorite Baroness albums. Let me know your thoughts. If you haven't listened to them and you do go listen to them, that would be awesome. Let me know what you think, always, of course. And yeah, seriously, that's all I got. Subscribe, like, share, go listen to music, but go listen to Red Album, man. It's such a fantastic journey. Such a fantastic journey. All right, that's all I got. Peace. Talk to you later.